The stone is cold beneath her knees. Sister Maria doesn't feel it anymore. Hasn't felt much of anything since the fire started 3 days ago. She's kneeling in what used to be the chapel garden, where she once grew rosemary and thyme, herbs for healing the sick who climbed the mountain path seeking mercy. Now the garden smells like smoke and something worse. Something she doesn't have words for. Her lips are moving in prayer, but no sound comes out. Around her, 12 other women kneel in identical silence, their habits torn, their faces blank as parchment. Above them, Ottoman soldiers stand in a loose circle, not guarding them exactly, just watching, waiting for something. One of the soldiers shifts his weight, and his shadow falls across Maria's hands. She notices, distantly, that her fingers are still clutching a wooden cross. She doesn't remember picking it up. Before we go further into what happened here, I'm genuinely curious. Where in the world are you watching this from? It's staggering to me that a story buried in Balkan monastery records for 5 centuries can reach you, wherever you are, right now. History has a way of traveling when we're brave enough to carry it. This is the Convent of the Holy Ascension. The year is 1463. The place is a mountainside in what is now northern Greece, though back then it was called Epirus, and it belonged to whoever had the most cannons pointed at it. For 180 years, this cluster of buildings, chapel, dormitory, infirmary, garden, had been maintained by women who wanted nothing to do with the wars constantly reshaping the map below them. They took vows of poverty, chastity, obedience. They copied manuscripts by candlelight. They sang matins at dawn. They asked very little from the world, and the world, for a long time, left them alone. Then Constantinople fell. When Mehmed II shattered the walls of Byzantium in 1453, he didn't just conquer a city. He severed a 1,000-year thread. Every church bell still ringing west of the Bosporus became an insult to his new order. Every monastery that refused to convert became evidence that his empire was incomplete. And so he sent letters, gracious, patient letters, to every Christian community in his expanding realm. The message was always the same: submit, convert, or disappear. But here's what the history books don't tell you. The Ottomans didn't need to massacre everyone who refused. Massacres are messy. They create martyrs. Songs get written. Legends spread. The dead become saints. No, what Mehmed perfected was something far more efficient. A kind of social surgery. You don't erase a people by killing them. You erase them by making sure no one remembers they existed. By 1463, this strategy had been tested across the empire. Armenian churches in Anatolia, Serbian monasteries in Kosovo, Greek convents scattered across the Aegean. Some were converted into mosques. Some were abandoned and left to collapse. But many, especially the ones housing women, were dealt with more quietly. They simply vanished from the records. No battles, no sieges, just silence where there used to be prayer. The Convent of the Holy Ascension was home to 31 women when the Ottoman column arrived. The youngest was 16. The oldest was 74. Most of them had never seen a soldier up close. Their entire lives had been structured around rhythm and routine: prayer at fixed hours, work in the garden, copying of texts, care for the sick. The abbess, a woman named Theodora, had been in the convent since she was 9 years old. She had outlived 2 plagues, an earthquake, and more abbesses than she could count. She was not easily frightened. When the soldiers first appeared on the ridge above the convent, Theodora rang the bell, not to summon help, because there was no help coming, but because that's what you do when something changes. You mark the moment. The bell had been cast in 1283. It had rung for births, deaths, holy days, and disasters. This would be the last time anyone heard it. The officer in charge was a man named Qasim Bey. His name appears in Ottoman military ledgers from the Epirus campaigns, specifically in requisition lists for grain and livestock seized from Christian communities. He was methodical, not cruel for cruelty's sake, but efficient in the way a man is efficient when he's done something many times before. He didn't storm the gates. He knocked. When Theodora answered, he spoke through a translator, a Greek man from a nearby village who had converted 2 years earlier to save his family's land. The translator's voice shook as he repeated Qasim Bey's words. "The Sultan offers you protection. You may continue your lives under Ottoman law. You will be provided for. All that is required is your acknowledgement of his authority and your acceptance of the true faith." Theodora listened carefully. Then she asked a question that appears in a letter written by the translator himself, a letter discovered in 1987 in the archives of the Monastery of St. John on Patmos. She asked, "If we refuse, will you kill us?" Qasim Bey smiled. "No," the translator repeated. "The Sultan does not make martyrs. We will simply take you to a place where your decision can be reconsidered." That phrase, reconsidered, carried a weight that wouldn't be understood until much later. That night, Theodora gathered the sisters in the chapel. She was 74 years old, and she had spent 65 of those years inside these walls. She knew what was coming. She had heard the stories from other convents, fragments of news carried by pilgrims and refugees. She knew that the Ottomans didn't burn women alive or execute them in public squares. What they did was subtler. They relocated them, redistributed them, placed them in households across the empire as servants, nurses, sometimes wives. It wasn't death, it was disappearance. She gave the sisters a choice. They could convert and remain together under Ottoman supervision, or they could refuse and face whatever came next. 18 women chose to convert that night. They were taken to a garrison town 20 miles south, given new names, and within a year, most of them had vanished into the records entirely, married off, sent to Constantinople, absorbed into the machinery of empire. The Ottoman system didn't need to destroy them. It just needed to make sure they were no longer nuns, no longer symbols of resistance, no longer a thread connecting the past to the present. But 13 women refused. Theodora was one of them. So was Sister Maria, who we met at the beginning. So was a woman named Eleni, who was 19 and had taken her vows only 8 months earlier. So was Sister Fatini, who had been a midwife before she joined the convent and who had delivered half the children in the valley below. These 13 women did not shout or resist. They simply knelt in the chapel and waited. Qasim Bey did not hurt them. That's important to understand. What happened next wasn't torture in the traditional sense. It was something more calculated. The 13 women were marched south under guard, not in chains but in ropes, toward the coast. The journey took 9 days. They were given no food for the first 3 days, then small amounts after that, just enough to keep them walking. The younger sisters carried the older ones when they collapsed. By the 5th day, Sister Fotini died of exhaustion. They buried her by the roadside with their bare hands. By the time they reached the port city of Preveza, only 11 remained. And this is where the story becomes almost unbearable. At Preveza, the women were not imprisoned. They were taken to a large house owned by an Ottoman official named Davud Pasha, a man whose name appears in Venetian diplomatic reports from the 1460s. Davud Pasha was known for his collection of curiosities, rare manuscripts, foreign artifacts, and people, especially people who represented something lost. Byzantine nobles, scholars, monks who still spoke ancient Greek, and now Christian nuns who refused to convert. He didn't force them to renounce their faith. He did something stranger. He invited them to live in his household as honored guests. They were given clean rooms, food, medical care. They were allowed to pray. They were even given a small chapel space in the courtyard. All he asked, according to a letter written by a Genoese merchant who visited,